As you settle in, feel your body sink deeper into the softness around you. Let your mind slow to the gentle rhythm of your breath, like a quiet river winding its way through a sleepy valley. Tonight, you are safe, and all that the day demanded can quietly dissolve into stillness. With every breath, you become calmer, more peaceful, ready to drift into gentle rest. Before we begin, I would love to know where you are listening from right now and what time it is. It's a small way to remember we're sharing this moment across the world, all settling down for rest together. The medieval morning. It is not the kind of fresh start you might imagine from your cozy bed with clean sheets and a soft pillow. No. The day in medieval times began in a setting that would test even the most hardened of modern souls, and certainly not for the better. Picture this. You wake, or more accurately, you slowly emerge from a deep, uneasy sleep, likely disturbed by the ruckus of farm animals, the clang of blacksmiths' hammers from the village square, or perhaps the inescapable stench that lingers in the air like an unwanted guest who just won tea leave. Your bed, if you can even call it that, might be a straw mattress stuffed into a wooden frame, often shared with multiple family members, and sometimes pests. The idea of sleep hygiene was, let's say, non-existent. No air conditioning, no quiet fans, just whatever damp and dust and fleas had decided to keep you company. You probably woke with grime on your skin from the night before. Bathing was, for most, a rare luxury. Rivers and communal baths were options, sure, but privacy was scarce, and the water itself often dubious. Soap, not exactly the kind you find in your bathroom cabinet. They used lye and ashes, which might have worked as a cleanser, but likely left your skin feeling rough and dry, and did nothing to eliminate the pervasive smells. Speaking of smells, medieval towns were essentially open-air toilets and garbage dumps combined. Streets, if you could call the muddy paths that were littered with waste, human, animal, and food scraps alike. Waste disposal was a medieval problem, solved mostly by just putting it somewhere else, often outside your own door, or in the nearest river that also served as the village water supply. Yes, that's right. Your drinking water was often downstream from the place where everyone emptied their chamber pots. Charming, isn't it? As you stumble out of bed and into your threadbare tunic, you might pause for a moment to wonder whether to start your day by washing your hands. But clean water was a treasure. Wells and springs might supply water, but the water was usually cold, sometimes muddy, and had to be hauled in buckets. Washing your hands carefully before breakfast, that's a luxury. And then there's breakfast, if you had it. For many peasants, the morning meal was a simple piece of coarse bread dipped in sour beer or weak ale. Nutrition was minimal, and the food often stale or moldy. The concept of breakfast cereals or fresh fruit was utterly alien. The medieval diet, for most, was a monotonous cycle of bread, pottage, a sort of vegetable stew, and occasionally some salted or smoked meat when you were lucky. Fresh meat was rare and expensive, and refrigeration was non-existent. Food preservation relied on smoking, salting, or pickling, techniques that made everything taste a little like a salty, smoky regret. Your teeth, if you still have them, probably ache from years of coarse, gritty bread, and little dental care. Toothbrushes were twigs or cloth. Toothpaste was a mixture of crushed herbs and ashes. Cavities and toothaches were common companions. If you survived this humble start, you might then turn to the day S work, but that's a tale for the next section. Now, as your eyelids feel heavier, let your breath slow even more. Let go of any tension in your muscles and imagine a soft, warm blanket gently tucking you in. You are safe here, free from the troubles of yesterday and tomorrow. Peace fills your mind and body, and you drift toward calm sleep as you continue to relax deeper into your resting place. Feel your breath flowing gently in and out, steady and calm, like a lullaby sung by the wind through ancient trees. Let your mind float quietly, free from any hurry or burden. Tonight, you are cradled by time itself, and every worry slowly fades into peaceful nothingness. Before we gently wander back into the past, please share where you are and what time it is, softly, if you wish. It reminds us that even across centuries and continents, we share this quiet moment together. Now that you've painfully survived the medieval morning, or at least imagined doing so, the real fun begins. By fun, I mean the kind of slow, unrelenting toil that modern people pay to avoid or only briefly tolerate. If you were a medieval peasant, and by peasant I mean the vast majority of people, not some fancy lord with a castle and servants, your day's work was essentially a never-ending list of chores and tasks that demanded hard physical labor and little rest. There were no coffee breaks, no weekends, and certainly no work-from-home days, unless your home was the field. One of the first things on the agenda was tending to animals, if you were lucky enough to have any. Chickens, pigs, cows, sheep. The animals had to be fed, watered, and herded, all while dodging the mud, the flies, and whatever droppings you might slip on. Farm animals were noisy, smelly, and constantly hungry, much like toddlers, except without the charming smiles. If you lived in a village, there was likely a communal field, or several smaller plots shared by families. Crop tending meant planting, weeding, harvesting, all by hand. The tools were rudimentary: wooden plows pulled by oxen or horses, sickles made of iron, and your own two hands. This work was not the kind that politely ends at 5 o'clock. It was dictated by the seasons, the weather, and the ever-present threat of pests and bad harvests. Let's pause here to marvel at the fact that most medieval peasants were illiterate. So much of their knowledge about farming was oral, passed down from parents to children. Imagine trying to memorize every detail about planting schedules, weather signs, animal care, and simple remedies without a single written note or smartphone reminder. It's both impressive and, frankly, a bit terrifying. Speaking of terrifying, let us talk about the medieval diet. Impact on your energy levels during this back-breaking labor. We already mentioned the coarse bread and watery pottage. But here's the kicker. Famine was a regular visitor. Years of bad harvests could lead to widespread hunger. Malnutrition meant weak muscles and frequent illness. If you were already struggling to lift that plow, imagine doing so with barely enough calories to keep your heart beating steadily. Back to work. The village smithy was another hub of medieval life. If you happened to be apprenticed or related to a blacksmith, it was a hot, noisy, and sweaty environment, filled with hammering on anvil, roaring fires, and the acrid smell of molten metal. The smith produced essential tools, from horseshoes to knives, but safety was minimal and accidents common. Meanwhile, women in medieval villages had their own mountain of daily chores, including grinding grain into flour using a heavy stone mill, fetching water from often distant wells or streams, preparing meals with limited ingredients, and cooking methods, and cleaning their often cramped and dirty homes. Remember, this was an era without modern plumbing or sanitation. Floors were dirt or stone, and sweeping was a daily necessity to keep things livable, though not exactly spotless. And speaking of cleaning, personal hygiene remained a serious challenge. It was not unusual for people to wear the same clothes for days, weeks, or even months. Washing was limited, and many believed too much bathing could actually harm health by opening the pores to evil spirits or illness. Charming, isn't it? So, a medieval person's natural scent was a complex blend of sweat, smoke from the hearth, and whatever herbs or perfumes they could afford or forage. Disease was another slow-moving but steady companion. Epidemics of plague, typhus, dysentery, and other ailments periodically swept through towns and villages. Without an understanding of germs or bacteria, medieval people relied on prayer, superstition, and folk remedies that were, at best, comforting placebo. If you caught a nasty fever, well, the best case scenario was rest. Worst case, you simply didn't last. If you were fortunate to live in a town rather than a village, your daily tasks shifted a bit toward trades and crafts: weaving, baking, tanning leather, making shoes, or selling goods at the market. The streets were noisy and crowded, filled with smells from tanners' vats, butcher shops, and human refuse. Work hours were long, and child labor was common. By late afternoon, the sun was already starting to dip, but work did not stop because of fading light. Candles were expensive and smoky, so most people finished chores before dark, then gathered in their small homes, where the only heat came from a central hearth, often smoky and inefficient. Now, as your body softens and your thoughts grow quiet, let your breath carry you away from the weight of time's burdens. Imagine a gentle breeze brushing through ancient trees, a soft rain tapping the leaves, a peaceful moment untouched by toil or trouble. Your mind is calm, your heart steady, sleep is near, and with it, rest beyond measure. Take a deep, slow breath in and feel the soft calm spreading through your body like the first light of dawn on a quiet field. With every exhale, release any lingering tension, any restless thought. Tonight, you are wrapped in quiet safety, carried gently on the wings of stillness. Let your mind drift like a feather, light and free. If you feel like it, quietly share where you are and what time it is. A small way to connect our wandering thoughts across time and space, reminding us that in this moment we are together in peace. By now, you have a pretty good idea that medieval life was less knight in shining armor and more slowly fading candle in a drafty room. But perhaps the most quietly frustrating part of all was dealing with illness and injury, something that modern people have become astonishingly skilled at managing. With hospitals, antibiotics, and even simple bandages, medieval medicine, on the other hand, was an art of hopeful guesses, strange rituals, and limited tools. If you scraped your knee on a stone or came down with a nasty cough, the likelihood of your body healing itself was far higher than any medieval cure. Let's start with the basics. Hospitals. The concept existed but these were often more like hospices or religious places offering comfort and prayer rather than active medical treatment. Doctors and surgeons were rare, expensive, and not always particularly competent by today's standards. Most medical knowledge came from ancient Greek and Roman texts, filtered through Arabic scholars and monasteries, but the practical application was a patchwork of superstition, tradition, and guesswork. The prevailing theory was the four humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Illness was thought to be caused by imbalances in these bodily fluids, and treatments aimed to restore balance, usually by bleeding the patient or purging them with laxatives or emetics. Neither procedure was particularly pleasant or effective. If you had a headache, you might be prescribed a poultice of herbs mashed onto your forehead, or perhaps a leech applied to suck out bad blood. Leeches were popular and widely used, and yes, they really did stick to people's skin and suck out blood. Charming, again. Surgery was a last resort and brutal. Without anesthesia, any operation, from setting a broken bone to amputations, was a horrifying ordeal, performed quickly and often without sterilization. Infection after surgery was common and usually fatal, but nobody understood why. Herbs were the closest thing to medicine for most people. From garlic and willow bark to mint and chamomile, folk remedies varied wildly. Some were harmless, some mildly helpful, others downright dangerous. For example, arsenic was sometimes used to treat skin conditions, which might explain a lot about medieval mortality rates. Childbirth was another dangerous venture, with high rates of maternal and infant mortality. Midwives assisted women, often with limited knowledge beyond tradition and superstition. No prenatal vitamins or ultrasounds here, just a lot of hope and prayer. The plague, or Black Death, which would arrive in the 14th century, was the most infamous and devastating disease. It spread quickly through fleas on rats, a fact unknown to medieval people, who instead blamed miasma, bad air, divine punishment, or scapegoated minorities. Entire villages were wiped out, and fear permeated every corner of life. Hygiene, or the lack thereof, contributed to illness. Bathing was infrequent, and water sources were contaminated. Dirty hands spread diseases, but the connection between germs and sickness would not be understood for centuries. If you fell ill, isolation was rare. Family members cared for the sick, often becoming ill themselves. Medical knowledge was passed down orally. With no standardized training, death was a constant companion. Life expectancy was low, but that statistic is skewed by high infant mortality. If you survived childhood, you might live into your 50s, which was considered a ripe old age. Despite all this, people found ways to endure. Religious faith offered comfort, communities supported each other, and folk stories celebrated resilience. But for a modern person, waking up in a medieval village, every cough or scrape was a serious gamble. Now, let your breath slow to a gentle rhythm, as steady as the soft pulse of the earth beneath you. Imagine a warm light spreading from your chest, filling you with calm and peace. You are safe, surrounded by stillness, and ready to drift deeper into rest. As you settle more deeply into your comfortable place, take a long, calm breath in, feeling the quiet calm filling your lungs. Breathe out slowly, releasing any tension or restless thoughts. Imagine yourself in a peaceful meadow at dawn, surrounded by gentle sounds and soft light. Here, Time moves slowly, and you are free to rest fully. If you wish, softly share your location and the time where you listen from. It is a simple way to remind us that across all places and times, we are here together, peacefully. Let's talk about what medieval people actually ate and drank, or more precisely, what they had no choice but to eat and drink, whether they liked it or not. Food wasn't exactly a gastronomic adventure, more a matter of survival and clever or desperate improvisation. The diet was heavily based on grains, rye, barley, oats, and especially wheat for those who could afford it. Bread was the staple, usually dark, dense, and coarse. White bread was a luxury, reserved for the wealthy. For the average person, bread might be riddled with bits of chaff, grit, and sometimes bits of rodent or insect. Charming breakfast companion, right? The bread was often dipped into pottage, a kind of thick stew or porridge made from whatever vegetables were available, such as onions, leeks, cabbage, beans, and peas. Meat was rare and expensive for peasants. Most ate it only on special occasions or festivals. When they did, it was usually salted or smoked to preserve it, which gave it a distinctly salty, chewy texture, not exactly designed to delight the palate. Fresh vegetables and fruits were seasonal and often meager in quantity. Root vegetables like turnips and carrots were more reliable. There were wild herbs and berries, but foraging was a skill born out of necessity, not leisure. Fish was a significant part of the diet for many, especially during religious fasting days when meat was forbidden. However, fresh fish was only an option near rivers or coasts, and preservation techniques like salting and smoking again gave a strong flavor not everyone loved. As for drink, well, water was often unsafe, as we've already noted. People drank weak ale or beer daily, even children. The low alcohol content and boiling during brewing made it safer than water, and it was also a source of calories and some nutrients. Wine was mostly for the wealthy or for special occasions. Milk was consumed, but less commonly than you might expect. It spoiled quickly without refrigeration and was often turned into cheese or butter. Butter was valuable, but used sparingly. Sugar was rare and imported, so sweets were a luxury, though honey was used to sweeten things when available. Meals were communal, eaten with fingers or wooden spoons, and hygiene was minimal. Table manners were not quite what modern etiquette would hope for. Preservation was a constant challenge. Without refrigeration or freezing, medieval cooks relied on salting, smoking, drying, and pickling to keep food edible. This meant that food was often quite salty, smoky, or sour. Not exactly the kind of cuisine that would inspire food bloggers. One fun fact: spices were highly prized and expensive, imported from faraway lands. Pepper, cinnamon, cloves, and nutmeg were status symbols more than everyday cooking ingredients. They masked the less than fresh flavors of medieval food. Given the diet's limitations, malnutrition and foodborne illnesses were common. Deficiencies in vitamins led to diseases like scurvy and rickets. But hunger and hard labor were constant companions. So, if you think about it, eating in medieval times was less about pleasure and more about keeping your energy up long enough to survive another day of muddy fields, cold nights, and questionable hygiene. Now, take a slow, soothing breath. Feel the softness of the air around you, the calm of your quiet place. Let your thoughts float gently like leaves on a calm stream. You are safe, warm, and ready to slip further into peaceful rest. Breathe in slowly, feeling the calm settle gently over you like a soft, worn blanket. Breathe out, letting go of all tightness and fuss. Imagine yourself in a quiet garden, the faint scent of earth and flowers drifting lightly on a warm breeze. Here, in this calm place, your mind can drift and your body can rest. If you feel like sharing, softly tell me where you are and what time it is. It's a small but lovely reminder that across different corners of the world, we're here together, winding down. Now, we arrive at a topic that medieval historians tend to gloss over quickly, probably because it's, well, unpleasant. But you deserve the full picture. Hygiene and sanitation in the Middle Ages were, to put it mildly, a challenge. Let's start with the obvious. Bathing. Contrary to the romantic idea of steamy bathhouses, the medieval approach to bathing was cautious at best. People feared that washing too much would open their pores to disease. Yes, science was still in the very early stages of figuring out that germs are a thing, so baths were infrequent. And when they happened, they might be more of a communal ritual than a private, relaxing soak. In towns and cities, there were public bathhouses, some even quite sophisticated, but these were also places where diseases spread easily and privacy was limited. So, many chose to avoid them or use them sparingly. If you were a peasant, a bath might be a quick splash in a river or a basin of water, with soap that was rough and made from lye and ashes, hardly a spa treatment. Clothing was washed even less frequently, often worn until it was threadbare, and smelled distinctly of, well, let's just say, life. Speaking of smell, the general stench of medieval towns and villages was something to behold. Streets were often narrow and crowded, with waste from humans and animals alike dumped into the gutters or simply left on the ground. There were no sewer systems, as we know them, just cesspits and open drains. It was not uncommon to accidentally step into something unpleasant while walking. Chamber pots were emptied from windows directly onto the streets below, and the smell must have been overwhelming, especially in warmer months. City ordinances sometimes tried to limit this, but enforcement was spotty. Pest control was another headache. Rats, mice, lice, fleas, and bedbugs were common guests in medieval homes. These pests contributed to disease spread and made life uncomfortable. People tried to keep clean, but without modern detergents or insecticides, success was limited. Dental hygiene was minimal. Toothbrushes were rudimentary, often twigs or cloths, and toothpaste was a concoction of crushed herbs and ashes. Cavities, gum disease, and tooth loss were widespread. No surprise there. Laundry was labor-intensive. Washing clothes required heating water, scrubbing fabrics by hand, and drying them on lines or bushes. Given the effort, it's no wonder clothes were changed infrequently. All of this meant that medieval people lived in a state of constant, low-grade discomfort regarding cleanliness. The idea of fresh-smelling, clean clothes and skin was a luxury almost unknown. It's worth noting that some religious and noble communities practiced more frequent washing and cleanliness rituals, often for spiritual reasons. Monasteries sometimes had running water and bath facilities, and the aristocracy had access to scented oils and perfumes to mask less desirable odors. But for the average person, cleanliness was a battle they mostly lost. And this wasn't just unpleasant, it was a serious health risk. Now, as you sink deeper into comfort, Feel your muscles soften, your thoughts slow. Imagine a gentle stream flowing quietly through a forest, soft leaves brushing the water's surface. You are safe, calm, and drifting toward rest. Let your breath carry you gently forward into peaceful sleep. Take a slow, deep breath in, feeling the soft calm wash over you like a gentle tide. Breathe out slowly, releasing all tension and fuss. Picture yourself wrapped in a warm, comforting shawl on a quiet evening, the world around you soft and still. Let your mind float gently, free from worry and full of ease. If you wish, softly share your location and the time where you're listening from. It as a small way to remind us we are sharing this peaceful moment across many places and times. Now, if you thought medieval mornings were rough, wait until we talk about what you would be wearing. Clothing in medieval times was far from the comfortable, stretchy fabrics we enjoy today. Instead, imagine layers of heavy, itchy, and sometimes downright unpleasant garments, worn day after day, often for months on end. Most medieval clothes were made from wool, linen, or hemp, materials that were sturdy but not exactly soft against the skin. Wool, while warm, could be scratchy, and if it got damp from rain or sweat, it stayed damp and cold, making you miserable. Linen was a bit softer, but more expensive, so less common among peasants. Undergarments were rare, or non-existent for many. If you were lucky enough to have a shirt or tunic made from linen, that might be your only layer next to the skin. Over that, you'd wear a woolen tunic, cloak, or mantle, depending on the weather. Colors were usually muted, natural browns, grays, and off-whites, because dyeing fabric was costly and often reserved for the wealthy. When colors were used, they came from plants, insects, or minerals, and faded quickly in the sun. Clothes were not washed often, partly because of the labor involved, and partly because washing could damage the fibers. The smell of sweat, smoke from the hearth, and general weariness clung to garments like an unwelcome perfume. Shoes were typically made from tough leather, stiff and uncomfortable, often without much padding or support. They might last for years, patched repeatedly. If you were barefoot, well, you were a step ahead of having to deal with tight, ill-fitting shoes, but faced other challenges like injury and infection. Hats and hoods were common to protect from rain and cold, but they often trapped heat and dirt close to your head. Hair washing was infrequent, so hats also served to hide the less pleasant realities of medieval grooming. If you were a noble, your clothes were far more elaborate. Silks, velvets, bright dyes, intricate embroidery, but that came with its own discomforts. Tight corsets, heavy garments, and limited mobility. Fashion was often more about status and display than comfort. During the colder months, layering was essential, but heating homes was inefficient. So much of your warmth came from your clothes. Still, it was common to suffer from chills and colds, as damp and cold penetrated even thick wool. In short, your medieval wardrobe was a constant companion to your daily discomfort, a mix of practicality and endurance, rather than style or ease. Now, as your body relaxes more and your breath becomes slow and steady, imagine the softness of a warm blanket, the gentle glow of a fire's light, the quiet hush of a peaceful evening. You are safe, calm, and ready to drift deeper into rest. Breathe in deeply, letting calm flow through you like a gentle evening breeze. Breathe out slowly, releasing the last bits of tension and thought. Imagine yourself wrapped in a cozy cloak under a vast, starry sky, the world hushed and peaceful around you. Tonight, you are safe, warm, and ready to rest fully. If you'd like, softly share where you are and what time it is. It's a quiet way to remember we're all settling down, together, across time and space. As the sun dips below the horizon and medieval towns and villages begin to darken, the day's relentless grind finally slows to a close. But don't be fooled. The difficulties don't magically vanish with the daylight. Nighttime in medieval times brought its own unique set of challenges, mostly invisible, yet very real to those who lived through them. First, there was the issue of light. Without electric bulbs or even efficient candles, homes were plunged into near complete darkness. Candles, made from tallow, animal fat, or beeswax, were expensive, smoky, and flickered uncertainly. People used them sparingly, and most houses had only one small candle burning, if any. This meant your activities after dark were severely limited. Reading by candlelight was a privilege few enjoyed. For most, night was for sleep or quiet conversation. Speaking of sleep, the conditions were less than ideal. As we mentioned earlier, beds were simple, straw mattresses or wooden pallets, often shared by multiple family members, sometimes even animals, because keeping livestock indoors during cold nights was common. The cold was an enemy. Houses were poorly insulated, and without central heating, warmth came mostly from the hearth, which was often extinguished at night to conserve fuel or for safety reasons. Many people slept in layers of clothing and huddled close together for warmth. Noise was another factor. Medieval villages and towns were anything but silent. Animal noises, drunken revelries, tavern brawls, and even the occasional wandering minstrel or town crier disrupted sleep. The lack of quiet meant rest was often fitful. Beyond comfort, safety was a concern. Nighttime brought dangers like theft, violence, or wild animals prowling near the edges of settlements. Towns sometimes had curfews and guards patrolling the streets. But these were not foolproof. Nighttime illnesses and sudden deaths were terrifying realities. Without modern medicine or emergency services, a fever or injury could quickly become fatal overnight. As you lay down, your mind might wander to the knowledge that many people did not survive long enough to see another sunrise. Infant mortality was high, plagues lurked, and accidents were common. The idea of a good night's sleep, free from fear, was a luxury few could afford. But even in this harsh world, people found moments of rest and peace. Stories were told by the hearth, prayers whispered into the dark, and dreams carried them away, if only for a time. Now, as you feel the weight of the day gently fall away, breathe slowly and deeply. Imagine the soft, steady beat of your heart syncing with the quiet night, a lullaby of stillness and peace. You are safe, cradled by time and calm, ready to drift into deep, healing sleep. And with that, our sleepy journey through the daily realities of medieval life comes to a close. If you ever find yourself wishing for a simpler time, just remember, you probably wouldn't last a day in medieval times. Sleep well, friend.